Hello everyone, this is Leah Whitehorse from Astrology, and in this recording I'm going to be looking at the astrology of September 2022. So as we come into this month, I wanted to just point out that Saturn and Uranus are now tightening that square aspect that they are repeating this year. It's not going to be exact like it was last year, but it is going to get very, very close. And so particularly September and October, this is when we will see this aspect in action most strongly. And I certainly feel like we're already getting quite a lot of manifestations from this aspect. I mentioned when I talked about it in a previous recording, I'm not quite sure which one it was, but I mentioned how we might hear more about COVID again. And certainly as this aspect kicked into gear, we did have a COVID wave. There was some rumblings about whether we should mask again or whether there should be any kinds of restrictions. Obviously, I'm talking about in the UK, but certainly it was rippling out across other countries as well. But now, of course, we also have the issue with monkeypox, and that has been declared an emergency in certain places. And we've also got a lot of issues now with the cost of living crisis here in the UK. I know in other places too, there are a lot of issues with the rise in prices for foods and all kinds of goods and of course energy. But in other countries, or some other countries, the governments have done something to alleviate some of that for the general public, whereas here in the UK, our government has chosen not to do that. And as a consequence, there is a rebellion building here amongst the public. There is a huge campaign called Don't Pay. So there's a suggestion they want to get 1 million people not to pay their gas bills, gas as in heating in the UK. I know gas can be petrol in America. So talking about heating and also electricity, basically the price of these utilities are ridiculously high when we are hearing that these companies are earning a huge amount of profit. So this is why we've got this backlash. And this is very Saturn square to Uranus. Saturn being the authorities, the rules, and Uranus being the hell no, we're not playing by those rules. So that's one way we're seeing this. We also need to remember too that Sedna is on the very final degree of Taurus, the anaretic degree. This is a degree that's associated with the Weeping Sisters. I talk about this degree a lot because it's very intense, and certainly with Sedna being on this degree now, we are seeing the problems with our resources. It's the sign Taurus, so it speaks of our security, our agriculture, our money, our financial systems, investment systems. All of this stuff is very acute right now. We've also got Jupiter in Aries, of course, at the moment too. And the combination of those factors, we could perhaps say that we're seeing some manifestations of this in the extreme weather events that are going on. There's been huge floods in places like Kentucky and Italy and Japan. There has also been the terrible heat waves here in the UK, across Europe. And in fact, I've just read that Spain has named the next heat wave. This is the first time ever that a heat wave has been given a name. So normally we just name storms, tornadoes, hurricanes, and so on. But now Spain have decided to name a heat wave because they are causing death and illness, and obviously a huge amount of problems like a storm can bring. And also when we give something a name, we see it, we recognize it for what it is. It's given an identity. And so in naming a heat wave, it's almost like it's bringing it into consciousness that this is happening, this is here. It's not just an extra warm year. There's more to it. And certainly Jupiter in Aries, that speaks of increasing, because Jupiter always magnifies what it touches. So increasing. Aries is fire. It's the first of fire. It's known to be hot and spicy. So therefore Jupiter in Aries naturally can build as far as heat is concerned. It's just making things hotter. And then we have Saturn on that final degree of Taurus, which is really accentuating that there are some issues here around our evolution. What are we evolving towards? And then, of course, Uranus going through Taurus as well. And it's recently been sparked by the North Node and also Mars. So we've had a lot of focus on this unstable ground, that everything is changing, and we're trying to keep our footing. This is Saturn. We're trying to keep our footing. We're trying to keep things steady. But if we're trying to keep things the same, that's not going to work. Things have to change moving forwards. And that is part of Saturn square to Uranus. So this sets the scene for September. We begin September on the 1st of September with Mars sextile to Jupiter. So this is a nice, helpful aspect. Mars sextile Jupiter prompts us to increase our energy levels, to do what we need to do to increase our energy levels. It also perhaps makes us believe in what we're doing, or it might ask you, do you believe in what you're doing right now? Does this mean something to you? Are the actions you are taking, do they bring you joy, or do they bring you a feeling that you're moving forwards to something that is positive? So Mars sextile Jupiter invites you to ask these questions. Mars will then enter the shadow zone of its upcoming retrograde period. This is on the 3rd of September. So it's not going to go retrograde just yet. The retrograde actually begins on the 30th of October, and that will go through to the 12th of January 2023. But the 3rd of September is the date that Mars will reach the point where it will retrograde back to later this year. So a simple way of putting this is that because Mars is going to be revisiting this part of the chart later down the line because of the retrograde period, it also means that we are likely to revisit certain things that are coming up around this time. In other words, pay attention. What is coming up for you around this time as we move into September? What actions are you feeling prompted to make? What goals are you exploring around this time? What kind of conflicts are perhaps happening around you, or internal conflicts? What kind of dialogue is going on in the mind? Remember, this is going to be Mars retrograde in Gemini. Gemini is a sign associated with the mind and communication. We think of that as being about our connection with other people, and yes, it is. It's about dialogue with others and communicating and connecting with others, but it's also about internal connections as well. So just pay attention to what is going on and what you're thinking around this time, because like I say, it's likely that these themes are going to be revisited. On the 5th of September, Venus is going to move into Virgo, and when Venus changes signs, she shifts how we relate to one another. So it speaks of our relationships, and also it changes how we approach our money matters and also our values. And Virgo is a very practical sign. It's associated with health and skills and improvement. And that's most likely what we're going to be focusing on. How can I improve things as far as my relationships are concerned? How can we make our relationships healthier? How can we make healthy connections with one another? And Virgo is a sign that is associated with the harvest time. It's often shown as a woman who's holding a sheaf of wheat. And so we're kind of sorting out the wheat from the chaff. What's working, what isn't working. So that's in our relationships with one another, but it also could be generally in life as well. This need to bring harmony, which is the motivation of Venus, to bring harmony into our lives. We want to bring harmony into our day-to-day life with the transit of Venus through Virgo. So we are going through everything, figuring out, is this working for me? And it is, like I say, a very practical approach. And the same with love matters as well, that it's all about what we do rather than what we say. It's showing people that we love them, usually by helping in some way. So it might be that you're just making sandwiches for your partner before they go to work, doing the little things. The little things matter in our relationships when Venus is in Virgo. And generally speaking, we have this appreciation of detail. It's wonderful for those of you who do creative work that's very detailed, very technical, like embroidery, those kinds of things. Venus in Virgo is perfect for that and seeks that perfection. Now, of course, the other side of this, the shadow side of this, is that we can start to see any imperfection as ugly and just unacceptable. And so we can become super focused on our flaws and each other's flaws, and we can start to nitpick in our relationships. So why do you always do this? And it's such a little thing, but it can get blown out of proportion. That's the one thing that we do need to watch when Venus is in Virgo. On the 6th of September, Pallas, the asteroid, will enter Cancer, and this is going to be a long transit because Pallas will have a retrograde period here. So altogether, Pallas will be in Cancer until the 2nd of May 2023. So it's a long period of time that we have to work with this. So Pallas Athena was born from the head of her father in full armor, ready to fight. She is the sister of Mars, so they are both warriors. However, Pallas is a different kind of warrior to Mars. Mars is all about the brute force, the punching and the kicking, but Pallas is much more about using her wisdom, using her intellect to resolve conflicts. So she's a problem solver, and that's what she tends to symbolize astrologically. She's a problem solver. She recognizes patterns in behavior or just in things. She is a mediator. And in Cancer, she's applying these problem solving abilities to issues that are connected to home and family. It's a very domestic area. The sign Cancer is associated with the domestic. So maybe we are mediating between family members, for example, or maybe we are just recognizing that there are certain patterns of behavior that are rooted in our family. It might be that globally or collectively we are being asked to really look at the wisdom of our history, to really look back. What has history taught us? We need to be looking at our roots and our ancestors and ancient teachings. This is all about learning from past experiences. Something about our past experience is relevant. And because Pallas will have this retrograde period in Cancer, we really need to take this into ourselves. We need to explore this deeply. Where might the conflicts, both internal and external, that we experience in life, where might these be rooted deep in the past? And this is what Pallas is going to be helping us with as she spends this long period of time in the sign of Cancer. Now, this idea of going back, of reviewing, is certainly going to be accentuated because Mercury will station retrograde on the 10th of September. So the first part of this retrograde period will be in the sign Libra. So this is where Mercury will station retrograde in Libra. So Libra is associated with the 7th house in the natural chart, in the chart for the collective. So we're asking questions around our relationships. We're doing a review of how we relate to one another, so our nearest and our dearest. Libra is also a sign because it's symbolized by the scales, associated with justice, with truth, with equality, with balance, and again with harmony. So Mercury retrograde is going to encourage us to explore where things are perhaps not feeling on equal footing between ourselves and others, or where we feel that there is some kind of injustice, or where we feel that perhaps there just needs to be something done to tune into each other better. And also just trying to find an internal balance within ourselves. And maybe with Mercury symbolizing the mind, so we could be looking at mental imbalances, for example, where we tend to catastrophize or where we tend to think really, really negatively about certain things. So again, it's about bringing the mind back into balance. I will just mention here as well that I'm going to be doing a post on my Patreon which will explore this Mercury retrograde in full, and I'll also be doing another post that explores the Mercury retrograde for the signs through the houses, so that you have a really good idea of how this retrograde period might work for you. On the 10th of September as well, we are going to have the full moon in Pisces. So this is quite a potent day with Mercury stationing on the same day as this strong full moon. So this full moon in Pisces is actually going to be conjunct Neptune, the ruler of Pisces. So it really ramps up that Neptunian energy and this feeling of being all at sea. And we've also got a square to Mars as well. So the moon and sun opposition will be square to Mars, creating a T-square pattern. So with the square to Mars, we clearly have some kind of tension here. Tension around issues connected with communication, with dialogue. So this is Mars in Gemini, and as I was saying before, we're going to be revisiting a lot of this material as we go forwards. So we've got some kind of conflict or just heat in how we communicate with one another, and also we've got some sense of feeling very uncertain, feeling very unsure of ourselves. And this is the moon conjunct Neptune. It feels like there's great big unknowns, and maybe we don't know what to do with that Mars action. We don't know how to proceed. We don't really perhaps know exactly what we're fighting. Perhaps there's some kind of mirage, there's some kind of deception, there's something going on that we can't quite see clearly, and that is making it very difficult to take action in some way. But also perhaps we are feeling really pushed that we must take some kind of action. So how do we do that? And the answer is always about listening to what our intuition is saying to us, given that the moon is in the sign of Pisces conjunct Neptune. And generally speaking, when we have a full moon in Pisces, we are very much put in touch with that spiritual side of ourselves. And we're also looking at issues connected to peace and unity. So with Mars in Gemini being pointed at by the lights, maybe this is why we're struggling, because there's so much conflict, there's so much division in our communities. And yet we're really feeling that we need to see that peace is possible. But how is it possible when there is all this divisive conversation going on? We do have some help though, because the moon will be sextile to Uranus. So the moon sextile to Uranus invites us to be open emotionally, to allow for a difference, to allow for a change. And I think when we have that openness to how things could be different, then that helps us to find new avenues of exploration when it comes to trying to resolve conflicts with one another. So the moon sextile to Uranus is going to maybe facilitate us to find a way out of some of this heated discussion that is going on with Mars in Gemini. On the 18th of September, Mars will form a sextile with Chiron, and Mercury will form an opposition to Jupiter. The reason I'm picking this date and these aspects out is because both these aspects are going to be repeated due to the retrogrades of Mars and Mercury. So Mars sextile Chiron, there will be another one of these on the 19th of December, and then the final sextile between these two in this particular series will be on the 11th of February 2023. So it feels like we are beginning a process, and the same with Mercury opposite to Jupiter, although that's a much smaller period of time because Mercury will only be retrograde for 3 weeks. But still, we've got something on here about how can we be motivated to heal? How can we be proactive, Mars, about our healing process with Chiron? And also we're exploring perhaps some kind of disconnect between what we think, Mercury, and what we believe with Jupiter. It might generally bring up ideas of conflict between people, because an opposition can speak of ourselves versus other people. So some kind of conflict between each other over our beliefs. And again, we've got a conversation about dialogue. So this seems to be repeated a lot, remembering that Mars is going to be retrograde in the communication sign of Gemini. So we need to explore this further to look at how are we thinking, how we communicate what we're thinking, and what are the beliefs that are underlying this. We also need to look at where we might sometimes make a sweeping judgment. That is also part of Jupiter as well, where maybe we get overwhelmed, just overwhelmed with information, too much stuff on the internet, too many books, too many papers, too many conversations. Obviously, having an education and understanding things is really important, but sometimes we can get so full of stuff from everywhere else that we don't know what we think. What is my opinion in this situation? What do I know to be true here? So we just need to pay attention to what is coming up for us around this time, because again, this is starting a process. And if there is a problem, if there is some kind of conflict going on, or we feel conflicted about something around this time, maybe we need to just stay aware that it's going to take some time for us to resolve this, and that's okay. Maybe we don't have all the information that we need just yet. So this is why we're being given this opportunity to review with Mercury retrograde, and then more reviewing with Mars retrograde. We're being given this opportunity to really explore what we think we know, what we've learned. And through that process, we're going to start to figure out how to bring everything together. So that's Chiron. Chiron, who is half man, half horse, who brings together these things that don't seem to fit together, but actually they do. So Mars sextile to Chiron is going to be really helpful for us to see where healing can happen, where we perhaps thought no healing was possible. On the 23rd of September, the Sun will move into Libra, so this heralds the autumn equinox in the northern hemisphere, and it's going to be spring equinox in the southern hemisphere. So autumn equinox is a time to give thanks for the harvest. It is also a time to honour balance of light and dark. This is the time when day and night are equal. Hence, equinox. Equi is to do with being equal, and nox is night. So equal day and night speaks of finding balance within ourselves. And so this consistent message keeps coming through about this inner harmony, needing to experience harmony within ourselves so that we can experience harmony with one another. And this is also the date that the Sun will conjoin Mercury. So Mercury is reaching the midpoint of its retrograde period. So we get some kind of illumination, some kind of understanding. Light floods the conscious mind. Mercury sits on the throne of the Sun, receiving messages from Source, which then are passed down to us so that we can then understand more about our situation, more about our relationships, more about how we can bring greater harmony into our lives. And then on the heels of this brilliant illumination from the Sun conjoining Mercury on the 0 degree, the autumn equinox degree in Libra, Mercury will move back into Virgo. So this is a sign that Mercury rules. So Mercury feels strong in this sign. But the retrograde suggests that something needs to be looked at again here. We need to go over the details again. Maybe there's something that we missed before that we need to see so that our lives can function more effectively and so that we can apply the healing that we need, whether that is physically or whether that is in our matters of communication. And maybe with Mercury making this journey from Libra through to Virgo, perhaps it's saying that there's been some kind of issue in our relationships because something about our day-to-day routines is not working for us. Or maybe for some it might be that there's been a problem at work that has then affected our home life, or perhaps it is indeed the relationships that we have with the people that we're working with, or with our clients, with our customers. And whilst Mercury is in Virgo in retrograde motion, it might also help us to really focus on our planner, or however you plan your life, your to-do list and so on, because sometimes it's easy to miss deadlines or to forget about that small thing that's actually really important. So just trying to keep on top of everything, or maybe even reorganizing the way that you keep on top of everything on a day-to-day basis. If that's not been working for you, this would be the perfect time to address that. We have a new moon in Libra on the 25th of September, and this is going to be a very interesting lunation because it's going to be widely conjunct Mercury. So it's an out of sign conjunction, but it's tapping into that Mercury opposition to Jupiter that I talked about earlier, the repeated aspect that we're going to get with this retrograde motion. So the new moon in Libra generally speaks of a new start of some kind around our relationships. So we're still talking about this same subject of how we connect with one another, how we find balance, how we find truth, justice, peace, equality, all of those things. And so the connection to the Mercury-Jupiter opposition is telling us once again that something about how we're thinking, how we're communicating, what we believe in, the assumptions that we make about one another perhaps are all part of this new start. We've got to have some kind of discussion here. Now we've also got an interesting pattern in this chart called a Thor's hammer pattern, and that is made up of the Sun and the Moon. They are the apex of this pattern, with Uranus and Saturn at the base. So again, we're tapping into Saturn square to Uranus. The Thor's hammer pattern is interesting because it tells us that there are some real gifts wrapped up in this chart. The energies that are available to us can really crush the problems that we're experiencing. However, the problem with the Thor's hammer pattern is that we have to wield these energies very, very carefully. Technically speaking, the myth that this is based on speaks of someone who acquires Thor's hammer when they shouldn't really have it and they don't really know how to use that hammer. So sometimes the analogy I use for the Thor's hammer pattern is using a sledgehammer to crack a nut. Sometimes we can go overboard, and remember, Mercury opposite to Jupiter and the Sun and Moon opposite to Jupiter also brings in something about going over the top in some way. So if things feel out of balance in whatever way in our lives, we can be tempted to make some kind of big sweeping judgment or change, or take some kind of big action. It's totally over the top compared to the situation that we're in. Everything seems very magnified once again with Jupiter. So we just have to watch that tendency so that we don't end up crushing what we have. We do have some help from Pluto. There's a dissociated trine between the new moon and Pluto. So we can say that if we are willing to look at our shadows, if we are willing to get underneath everything, because sometimes Libra is a sign that wants to be ultra polite. It wants to keep everything on the surface, looking good. But Pluto is the one who's going to get down into the dirt kind of thing. So if we're prepared to really get into it and really face the truth of our situation, then that's going to help to give us the strength that we need to wisely make use of the energies in this chart and to be able to wield Thor's hammer in a way that's going to bring transformation, positive, constructive transformation in our lives. As we come towards the end of the month, on the 28th of September, Mars will form a trine to Saturn. And this is a great aspect for perseverance. Mars is the energy, the drive, the will, the goal, the passion. Saturn is the one who is a taskmaster. Saturn is good management. Saturn is accountable, responsible, and it also helps us with tasks that are going to take us a time to finish. So Mars trine Saturn is really good for anything that you've been procrastinating over. Dive in, get it done, because Mars trine Saturn, it's like, I want to climb this mountain and I am going to get to the top. So it can really help us to accomplish a project of note. Then on the 29th of September, we've got Venus entering Libra and Ceres entering Virgo. So Venus changing signs once again changes the way that we relate to one another, and also the way we approach matters to do with money and our values and our self-esteem. So Venus going into Libra, often we feel more open to the idea of connecting with others. There's obviously a lot of focus on the relationship side of things because we have a lot of emphasis now on the sign of Libra, because we're in Libra season anyway, with the sun being here. And Venus in Libra speaks of the love of connection, the love of one-to-one experiences and appreciating one another. So it's a really nice time, if you have a significant other, to show them that you appreciate them in whatever way is right for you. And also you can do this in business as well. So showing appreciation for your clients and customers, because Libra, we nearly always talk about Libra and the corresponding 7th house as being about marriage and relationships, and we think of love, but it can also just mean generally other people. And it can also speak of any relationship that is a close relationship that works on a one-to-one level. So yeah, anything to do with appreciating clients and customers and showing people that you do value them, that you do care for them, that you do like them. That's a really nice way of working with Venus in Libra. Venus in Libra also seeks to bring peace and harmony in situations. So this is a naturally very diplomatic transit as well. So it's ideal if there has been any kinds of conflicts going on. I guess the negative of that is that sometimes, because Venus is so focused on making everything kind of smooth between everybody, that she doesn't want to get beneath the surface. She doesn't want to unearth anything that's rather unpleasant. She'd much rather just make it look pretty, even if it's not pretty underneath. So that's what we need to be aware of whilst Venus is in Libra. Now, with Ceres entering Virgo, I think it was Demetra George that suggested that Ceres might rule Virgo because there is a correspondence between them. I don't know about asteroids ruling signs, but I can definitely see that there is an affinity, given that Virgo is associated with the harvest, and also Ceres is connected with foods. She's very much Mother Earth. So yeah, I can see there's a connection with these two. So when Ceres changes signs, it changes the way that we approach nurturing and cherishing one another. So again, Virgo is a very practical sign. So when it comes to nurturing that which we love, we're going to be doing that in very practical ways. Now, also we could say that Ceres moving into Virgo is about nurturing our body with foods. So understanding the correspondence between what we eat and how that affects us on a physical level, but also perhaps on an energetic level. So it might be useful just to pay attention to what you're eating and how you feel on an energetic level, but also on a physical level as well. During this transit, we might also want to be nurturing our skills. So getting better at something, practicing. Practice makes perfect. I guess the negative of that, though, is that we need to take care that Ceres in Virgo doesn't become like the all-criticizing mother. You know, the type of person where nothing their child does is ever good enough. They're constantly told to improve, to get better, to keep practicing, to do this, to do that, because then it will be perfect, but it's never good enough. So we just need to make sure that our inner voice does not start to tell us those kinds of stories, and allow ourselves to enjoy the process of learning and of practicing, to enjoy the practice period, whatever it is, whether it's a musical instrument or whether it's learning a new skill at work, enjoying that, because that way we can make learning almost like a whole body experience. If we're feeling frustrated and annoyed and, you know, all those kinds of things, then on some level we're shutting down from the learning process. So Ceres in Virgo, positively speaking, is about enjoying the abundant experience of learning and improving in our lives, and allowing ourselves to sometimes make mistakes. And if we do make a mistake, to continue to be loving and kind towards ourselves, so that we can then keep practicing until eventually the skill that we are trying to learn becomes second nature. This brings me to the end of this reading for September 2022. If you would like to hear more from me, do check out my Patreon account, where I do readings for the lunations. I write a weekly forecast. I do a bi-monthly Q&A, and I also have lots of previous articles to access on the different tiers as well. So I'll put the link below. If you enjoyed this video, then please do click the like button and subscribe. I hope you found this helpful, and I wish you many blessings on your path.